I'm very proud and privileged to serve in this John Key-led government and also to stand up and support this budget. It's a fantastic budget from a government that's determined to help New Zealand grow faster. It's a budget for building that brighter future. It's a budget that delivers the statistic that the opposition doesn't like to hear, 170,000 new jobs over the next 4 years. Mr Speaker, I'd like to welcome unexpectedly the contribution of the previous Green Speaker on the contribution about businesses, because I think there's far too little spoken about businesses in this House. And last week and the week before I was privileged to attend and speak at 2 awards ceremonies, New Zealand High Tech Awards and the Wellington Gold Awards. Both of them were full of entrepreneurs, innovators and ideas people. And being there at both events reminded me of why we do what we do. And it reminded me once again how jobs are created and how growth is achieved. Governments ultimately don't create that many jobs. We can help a little bit in the short term with the initiatives that we do, like job opportunities and Community Max, but governments can't hold up the sky. Ultimately, jobs are created by businesses, and not just any businesses, but businesses where we have a competitive advantage in this country to create ongoing jobs and wealth. New Zealand is a small country at the bottom of the world. Just about everybody who is here has ancestors that came here and survived on their wits and their ingenuity. And as a country, we traded to get ahead. We're a nation of traders. The last Labor government forgot that. They thought you could grow and grow by increasing the size of the public sector and that the traders would look after themselves. The government sector, the services sector, the household sector, they all grew and grew while the people that traded went backwards. And when the global recession came, so came the financial reckoning, and as a country we were up the proverbial without a paddle. Now, Warren Buffett has a saying about recessions: when the tide goes out, you see who was swimming naked. And as a country, we surely were. Suddenly, companies and people were stopped paying taxes at the apex of the biggest government spending boom this country had seen. And we inherited a huge fiscal hole and a decade of deficits. We had to act, and we did last year with a very careful budget. It was done carefully and well. As a result, we had a more mild recession in this country and most countries and we've borrowed one of the least amounts of additional funding for stimulus packages. And Labor criticised us. And then we've set to work to help the economy grow faster. We've set to encourage our traders. They trade more goods, they trade more food, they trade more resources, and they trade more bits and bytes. So how do you do that? Well, you do that by building a tax system that encourages initiative and rewards hard work. It's done by reforming regulations and ensuring the country's laws give more people more room to do more things. That encourages industries to grow and add more jobs. You unlock responsible mining opportunities for jobs, unlock irrigation opportunities for jobs, unlock more agriculture space. All these things, they're challenging to do, but we are determined to do them, and by that, getting New Zealand to grow faster. Meanwhile, Labor is in the rut that they led New Zealand into. They lecture the government to create more jobs, but they did nothing to tackle any of these issues. And on tax, they are even worse. They remain completely in denial about the impact their 39-cent MV tax had on New Zealand. They made everybody pay it if they earn more than $60,000 a year. They started a raft of tax avoidance, a flight of skilled workers across the Tasman, and they removed any incentive for people to better themselves and get ahead. They choked growth in the tradable sector. And New Zealanders know it, and a majority of New Zealanders know that that tax should go, and that's what's happened. And what's Labor saying now? Have they seen the error of their ways? No. They're saying they'd keep the GST increase and put the MV tax back on. They haven't learned a thing. It's strangled growth in the productive sector. It created massive incentives for people to spend their time avoiding it, and it sent record numbers of Kiwis overseas, but they say they'd bring it back. So what are they saying about government expenditure? Surely they would support government's reasonable efforts to stop the growth in government spending in the face of the world economic recession. Have they yet seen that uncontrolled increases in government spending had to stop? No, they haven't. They've criticised every single government move to curb spending. Every decision to stop low-quality spending, every move to put fiscal discipline back in the public service, every move to cap the massive rise in the size of the core public service that happened under Labor's watch, they oppose it all. They still bleat on about Labor programs that we had to stop a year and a half ago. The only conclusion that you can have about Labor and spending is that they haven't learnt a thing. Controlling public sector spending is one of the key ways government can help get the tradable sector to grow. Uncontrolled public spending means more borrowing. Borrowing means higher interest rates than you'd otherwise have, and higher interest rates makes it harder for firms to invest and raises the cost of living. Higher than necessary interest rates from higher than reasonable public spending means something else too. It means higher exchange rates. So here's the irony. The Labor Party decided that exchange rates were too high. They decided that last year. So they have declared they'd break the consensus on monetary policy, which is a bit like breaking the consensus on gravity. They don't know what else to do, but they are raging against high exchange rates. So what is the main lever that governments have to achieve sustainable interest rates? Government spending. That's right, you keep your spending under control, you keep your interest rates on a lower track, less money flows in, and your exchange rate over time is lower and more sustainable. That's how you do it. So that's the irony. The party that's the last of the big spenders rails against the exchange rate and yet wants to turbocharge government spending and increase our debt again. So God forbid they get back in charge of the Treasury with David Cunliffe as finance spokesman. But that is the Labor Party. They haven't learned a thing. They still think that losing the 2008 election was a cruel hoax. You think they'd be over it a bit by now. They haven't woken up to the stifling effect they had on the New Zealand economy. This budget does four crucial things, Mr. Speaker. It rebalances our economy for growth, encourages more money into savings and investment and less into property and consumption. That's the first and very important thing it does. It lowers tax rates to encourage more people to work hard and get ahead. Lowers the tax rates, the marginal tax rates, so that 76% of New Zealanders now have a marginal tax rate of 17.5%. And it lowers the top marginal tax rate, and that is important to keep more skilled workers in New Zealand. The third thing it does is it keeps government debt under control and puts more of the money we have got into health and education. And it emphatically does that. The health budget next year, from July 1 to June 30th, 2011, $13.6 billion. That's the highest health budget ever, but also the highest ever percentage of New Zealand's GDP spent on health. And the other side say that it's a cut. Well, it just goes to show that they can't count. And also we've invested a huge amount in education, and it's health and education that have been the big beneficiaries in spending in this budget. And that's what spending on core public services is all about. And finally, Mr. Speaker, the fourth and most important thing that this budget does is investing in and encouraging sectors that will help New Zealand grow faster, like the science sector, like the transport sector, like the communications sector, like the tourism sector, the extra money that's gone into tourism marketing. And it also does things and signals things that we're putting effort into in reducing regulations and providing more opportunities to private businesses in resources and aquaculture. These are the things we need to get New Zealand to grow faster. It is so important that this country grows faster, because unless you get a faster growth rate, you can't afford all the things that the other side rails on about at all times. But no matter how fast the country grows, you can't afford undisciplined public expenditure, and that's what the other side has to offer. This budget is a fantastic budget for its time, Mr. Speaker. It has obviously been acknowledged by New Zealanders to be a good budget for this country, and I'm happy to support it, obviously, and commend it to the House.